Hello there, and welcome to today's episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast. My name is Monica Burns, and I am so glad that you're here to join me today. If you want to make the most of education technology, aka EdTech, well, you are in the right place. My goal has always been to help make EdTech easier and give you ideas you can try yourself, share with a colleague, or bookmark for later in the school year. Every Tuesday here on the Easy EdTech Podcast, you'll hear stories from my time in the classroom, the work I do now with schools and districts, and my travels to different EdTech events. Get ready for solo episodes where I share some quick tips and stories, and interviews full of practical ideas and stories from new guests each month. If we mention something you'd like to check out, make sure to click the link. You'll find it in the episode description or the summary area where you're listening to this podcast, or you can find every episode and all of the resources we mention by going to classtechtips.com/podcast, or by going to classtechtips.com and just clicking on the Easy EdTech Podcast button at the top of the page. This episode is sponsored by Polsey, classroom engagement without the setup. Say you teach 7th grade life science. Ask Polsey for a 5-question review on the cells unit with an icebreaker. Polsey builds the live session with contextual questions in under 30 seconds. Students answer from any browser. No app, no logins. Use code ClassTechTips to get your first 2 months free. Sign up at polsey.co. That's POLLZY.co. This week's episode is all about chatbot tips that help you go beyond some of the basics. Now, for some educators I work with and support, right, you've maybe been in chatbots, you've been using ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, for a couple years now. Other times when I lead a workshop or webinar for a district or school, I find that people might have dabbled a little bit or heard some stories, but really haven't spent too much time in these tools. So today's episode is really for someone who has a bit of context. Maybe they've opened up a chatbot before, they've tried out, things, right? They use it every day to help solve problems. But if you're totally brand new to chatbots, there's definitely some nuggets of some gems of info for you also. So even though our focus for this episode is going a bit beyond the basics, I've got some things that I hope will feel good for someone who's, brand new or new in the sense that they haven't been inside of a chatbot recently. So kind of got a whole bunch of things for you today. So when I first started sharing chatbot strategies with educators a few years ago, like I said, for many people, it was their first time exploring generative AI. And if you are one of the educators who have been playing around for a little bit, right, there are some small shifts in how you interact with a chatbot that can really make a big difference. And so we're going to go through 4 areas, if you will, today, 4 strategies that I think are great to add into your tool belt. Now, there's just lots of different ways to interact with a chatbot. And I often, when I lead a workshop or a webinar, share strategies that kind of give people time to, I call it, a choose your own adventure, right? We might be familiar with those books where you kind of flip to the page of where you want the characters to go next. And, when jumping into a chatbot for the first time, you might simply ask a question and then get an answer to that question. And as you spend more time with these tools, right, you figure out that the better result really connects back to the better prompt or input. And that's really when you give some context. So instead of a super simple, question or task, you might share some background information. Like, for example, if you're asking to help create a lesson, you can add more context like grade level, student needs, the format you prefer, or even the standards you're targeting. The more context you provide up front, the less refining or revisions you have to do afterwards. And over time, you might go a bit further than just a simple, prompt to something more complex. You're kind of starting to build a conversation or a back and forth with a chatbot instead of using it like a search engine, more like a collaborative partner that you're now saying, well, what about this? Or how about this? Right. And kind of going back and forth, right, to gather some ideas until you have something that's actually useful for you. So instead of getting an output that's just okay, right? You end up with something that's closer, maybe 80 to 90% of the way that you need it to be in order to put it into use. So with that, context, let's look at 4 strategies. I've got 4 of them for you that you can just sneak in to your prompt. And again, if you are feeling like you are super high level, these might be ones that you bring into your own coaching practice, whether that's formally coaching someone or just having some casual conversations if people come to you, as that person in your school community. So the first strategy is to assign a role. Now, this is one of the simplest ways to improve your chatbot results is tell it who you want it to be. You're essentially giving a chatbot a role, and this gives the chatbot context about the perspective and expertise it should bring to a lesson, right? You can keep it simple, right, with what you're asking for, right, by saying, I'm creating this lesson for a group of 10th graders. That gives it some context, right, to adjust maybe their reading level and the complexity. Or you could be more specific and say, act as an experienced 3rd grade reading specialist. Help me create guided reading questions for this passage. And that extra detail means the chatbot's going to focus more on comprehension strategies, more on vocabulary. It'll suggest the kinds of scaffolding questions a reading specialist might actually ask. So even something simple like adding in a role, and sometimes you'll see this if you're using a chatbot prompting framework, like role is one of the things or on the acronym, but just adding in that one sentence, that one piece of context is an easy thing to make a big difference. It's also a great starting point for you, for someone you're working with, to remember that giving some more detail is really going to help get a high quality response. Strategy 2 is to reply to refine. So this is a strategy I come back to probably more than any other on this list. And you want to think of that first prompt you give your chatbot as a way to get a rough draft. It doesn't have to be perfect. Instead, it acts as that start of the conversation. So after you get your first response, and you've probably heard me use this term or this phrase if you've joined me for a workshop or webinar, you'll reply to refine. So you might say, this is great, but make it shorter. Add discussion questions after each section, or rewrite this with simpler vocabulary, or the tone is too formal, make it warmer, more conversational, or add a row to the rubric for citations. So each reply pushes the output closer to what you actually need. And you'll probably find that the second or third response is just way better than the first thing that you got. The chatbot now has some context from this conversation. It understands your preferences, your constraints, your goals, and this might even help build that prompting muscle for you. So when you start asking for help with something, you actually put in more things. Like, sure, you could follow up and say, this is great, but make it shorter. Now you might say, you know what? I always tend to find myself saying that in my prompt. I'm just going to say how long I want this to be, right? So it's also kind of training you to think about how you want to set up your chatbot prompts. Strategy 3 is to use the ask me questions technique. Now, for as much as I reply to refine, I use this one so much too. And you might remember this strategy if you read the blog or get my newsletter. I shared this one in a post about using AI to help with like newsletter drafting. And it's a really powerful strategy you can use in so many contexts. I use this even personally, like if I have a question maybe about a road trip that we're thinking of going on, right? Or something new that I'm just not sure. I'll say like, ask me, 5 questions to help me get a better answer, right? So you can really just write in your normal prompt, like the thing that you're asking for, and then say, right, maybe it's I need help creating whatever the thing is you're working on. And then you say, ask me questions to help. Sometimes I'll say, ask me at least 5 questions, right? Really depends. Now, the chatbot will respond with a series of targeted questions about your grade level, your audience, your preference, and then you just answer them. And this is where the microphone or dictation feature comes in handy. And instead of typing detailed responses, you can look at the questions, press the dictation or microphone button. Almost every chatbot has this, and you can just spit out, right? Just talk through the answers. Really great way. And what makes this technique really effective is it solves what you might think of as like a blank page problem. So you don't need to know the perfect prompt, right? You just start the conversation. It will guide you through the details it needs. It's not perfect, of course, but it'll certainly help you get your wheels spinning and maybe something you might have forgotten to ask too. And the fourth strategy, let's do a recap first. Assign a role, reply to refine, use the ask me questions technique. Strategy 4 is upload to change. Now, most chatbots let you upload files like PDF, images, documents, spreadsheets. Then you can ask the AI to do something with that content. This is a massive time saver when you already have a resource and you want to transform it into something a little bit different. So here's how this might work. Now, remember, you're only uploading content you have permission to add, not something that has student information or anything private like that. Some schools are using tools that are in like a walled garden or part of your enterprise account. So you'd want to double check with your, admin to see what you have permission to upload and share. But generally speaking, right, here are some examples of how, teachers could use this. You might upload a PDF of a slide deck that you've made and ask for a study guide, or upload a lesson plan and ask the chatbot to restructure it into a different format, like put this in a list of most important things to, not forget to mention, right? Whatever you want it to, however you want it to reformat it. Or upload a rubric and ask for a version with more student-friendly language. So in a webinar I hosted just a couple months ago, I demonstrated this live for participants by uploading a pretty detailed lesson plan about animal adaptations, and I asked Gemini to turn it into a study guide. Within a minute, I had a well-structured study guide based on the lesson content, and it captured the key concepts and the vocab. Even though it wasn't perfect, I made something that needed just a few tweaks instead of me needing to start totally from scratch or having like a couple windows open trying to copy and paste from that slide deck or anything like that. In Gemini, you can actually add files directly from Google Drive, which makes this a super fast workflow. So when I think about using AI to support a teacher's workflow, I think of it really as a head start. A year or two ago, I would have said that AI gets you maybe 70 or 80% of the way there, and then your expertise fills in the rest. But, today I would say the combo of having stronger models and having a more experience, right, that many of us have with chatbots, you're probably getting closer to 80 to 90% of the way there. It's, exciting for sure, but also important to remember that as these outputs are getting stronger with your prompting, your smarter prompting and stronger models, it's tempting to just copy and paste the output when it looks like it's close to finish. But you really want to keep you, the human, in the loop, reviewing, editing, making sure the output fits your specific students is absolutely essential. I like to think of it as, AI handles the heavy lifting of formatting, structuring, drafting, but your expertise, your voice really shines in the final product that you make. So I'd love to hear which of these AI chatbot strategies is one that maybe already is in your tool belt or you're thinking of adding to your tool belt, or maybe a favorite that I didn't mention. You can always find me by just doing a quick reply to my Monday newsletter. If you don't get the newsletter, it's totally free. You can just go to classtechtips.com/newsletter, or just go to the blog and you'll see a newsletter button towards the bottom. And then you can reply to my email with your thoughts, your ideas, your questions. I get these emails all the time from people. I love seeing what you're excited about. I reply to everything I get and hopefully we'll continue to be able to do that. So please just send that note, just hit reply on that Monday newsletter and I will get right back to you. So let's make this EdTech easy with a few key points from today's episode. First, provide specific context, grade level, goals, format in your prompt to improve AI output quality. Treat your first prompt as a draft and refine results through follow-up responses. Use the Ask Me Questions technique to help the chatbot guide your thinking. Upload existing materials to quickly transform them into new formats or resources. Remember, you can find the show notes and the full list of resources from today's episode by heading to easyedtechpodcast.com and finding today's episode number 374. Thank you to Polsey for sponsoring this episode. Polls, quizzes, and word clouds for your classroom ready in under 30 seconds. Sign up at polsey.co with code ClassTechTips for 2 months free. Thank you for listening to this new episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast. I love creating new episodes for you each week, but I could use a bit of help spreading the word about the podcast. Can you leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app? Spotify will let you tap on the stars, and Apple Podcasts will let you tap on the stars and leave a 1 or 2 sentence review. Thank you so much for taking this extra step. It helps other educators find episodes like this one when they're searching for EdTech tips.